family factor, yes. But please, Josh.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us for our third Youth Adaptation Dialogue, and also to celebrate the International Youth Day. We will give it a couple of minutes to allow those who typically you click the join button and you realize you have to download Zoom and you have to get it on the phone, on the computer. So we give a couple of minutes for folks to join us. And while we do that, please, we would welcome you to use the chat function to tell us where you are dialing in from today. So your name and the country you're joining from, that'd be very nice. So I'm just going to start first. I'm Joshua and I'm joining today from Switzerland. And please do the same. Thank you. And please, if you are not speaking, kindly mute. This is to allow us to hear when our main speakers take the floor.
Hello everyone, my name is Hassan Modi Yassin. I'm from Somalia.
Some prefers to use the audio. For everyone else, yeah, kindly use the text chats to introduce yourself. And I think now we are good to go. Great to have many people here: India, Denmark, Canada, Nepal, Vienna, Germany, Spain, Philippines, Ghana, Belgium. This is awesome. So really, International Youth Day, bringing people from different parts of the world together. Just a few of logistical notes. As presenters are presenting, please put your questions in the chat box so that you don't forget them while they are speaking and after they finish speaking. We are very grateful to have a lot of people from different agencies and organizations joining us today. Like I said, kindly keep mute when you're not speaking. And when we have the moment to take a photo together, we ask that you turn your videos on. Without not taking much of the time we have for all the important things we have to do today, I'm happy to hand over to Ms. Adriana Valenzuela, who is the Youth Program Lead and Education Manager also at the GCA. Adriana, over to you, and thanks a lot. Hello, Adriana. Okay, I think we might have a technical challenge with Adriana's microphone, but happy to proceed. Once again, this is the third series of the Youth Adaptation Dialogues, which we've been organizing. The first one was on local leaded action together with our partners in Bangladesh, ICAD. Last month, we had partnership with UNESCO and also with Ibadrola, where we put together the youth and skills as we celebrated Youth Skills Day. And this month, we are focusing on climate resilience and youth leadership in adaptation and celebrating young people and their leadership during extreme weather events and also the advocacy on adaptation. To start the event, I'm very honored to invite the CEO of the Global Center on Adaptation, Professor Dr. Patrick Verkoyen, for him to deliver a keynote remarks to mark the beginning of this event. Professor Dr. Patrick Verkoyen, please, over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Josh, and colleagues and friends, for this very important moment. Obviously, today is International Youth Day, and actually, I think we all should advocate that we have 365 youth days a year, because it is clear when we saw the IPCC report earlier this week that the adults in the room clearly has not managed to reduce our carbon footprint, have not managed to protect lives and livelihoods in the way it should do. And that's why it's so important that I think that the next generation is empowered to really hold all ourselves, adults, accountable going forward. So on the back of the IPCC report, I'm sure you do have done too. I have done lots of media engagements in terms of what needs to happen in the coming months and coming years. And obviously, we all need to focus very much on the mitigation agenda. I think many youth leaders have been very focused in the last few years on raising their voices to lower our carbon footprint, to eradicate fossil fuel subsidies, to put a price on carbon. And that's exactly what we need to do. But at the same time, given that the impacts in the climate impacts and climate phenomena in the system are increasing over time, I think one of the shocking takeaways from the IPCC report was, at least for me, is there are 5 models of the future that even the most aggressive model in reducing our carbon footprint will lead to an increase of global warming to over the 1.5 threshold by the middle of the century. With other words, the impacts which we see today, whether it's the floods in the Netherlands or the fires in parts of the world or the heat waves or the droughts, will only exponentially increase over time as well. So the case for adaptation cannot be made any stronger, I would think. On youth leadership, it is a very simple thing to say. We need to have youth leaders, but what does it really mean? So when I read the new technical paper, it's going to be presented today, and Sander Chan, one of our lead authors, together with the partners, have produced this report together with sort of youth input based on the questionnaire and deep dive interviews in Africa and in China. What I found really saddening, but at the same time also underscoring the urgency, in essence, were 3 things coming out of the report. It was about the group of youth advocates who are not engaging in the climate debate. And what I saw particularly from the questionnaire, there were 3 reasons why they are not engaging. One reason was, I feel powerless. There were lots of people who said, I feel powerless to engage. The second was, I was not even invited to join the conversation, let alone, let's say, coming up with solutions. And the third sort of reason was, I don't even know how to engage. So we at the GCA, right, our mission is to drive adaptation actions at scale and speed across the globe, but particularly in developing countries, because there the brunt of the impacts are being felt today and will be felt also tomorrow. We feel very strongly, and I personally feel very passionately about this empowerment agenda, particularly for the youth, and particularly for women. That's why very recently, hopefully you are engaging in this process, we launched specifically for Africa a so-called Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program. It is 25 billion over 5 years, and it has a dedicated youth leadership, youth empowerment agenda. So what I hope to get out of this, this dialogue today is not only a dialogue, but is a concrete action plan where we basically, we meaning those connected in this conversation, we have a sort of a social contract. We as GCA, we're committed to certain things, and we hope to work with you and others to drive this empowerment agenda. Hopefully Adriana and others in today's conversation can give a little bit more detail, you Josh, a little bit more details on the youth flagship program which we have, the youth solution challenge which we're going to launch, which is basically driving entrepreneurship development and also youth jobs, in this case on the African continent. Because it would be a completely missed opportunity in the coming years if we would not work much stronger with you, not in a tokenistic way, not just inviting you to the conversation, but particularly to drive action going forward. So I'm delighted to join this conversation. I'm very grateful for the technical report which is produced by the team and the partners which were involved in it. And great that Sander, that you will introduce the findings of the report. But I think it's very, very important today and moving forward that we take a little bit of a step back and just learn from the findings of the report. And what then does it mean in terms of the empowerment agenda? What are the critical 3 things which we need to do going forward? So I would also hope to learn from you what you think needs to happen, not only to talk about the report, but on the critical action points which are on the critical path, so to say. So thank you again, Joshua, also for your specific role in the Youth Adaptation Network. Thank you, Adriana. Hopefully your sound works again, for your leadership on this agenda, on the empowerment agenda, on the educational agenda, on the entrepreneurship agenda. So let's roll up our sleeves today and tomorrow, not only on Youth Day, but on every day going forward. So thank you again for this kind invitation. And I'm delighted to hear your views, and particularly your recommendations, suggestions on how we as GCA can do things better, how we can as GCA can do things differently going forward. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Dr. Patrick Vercoen, for your kind remarks, but also the inspiration and the sort of reassurance that the GCA is here to work together with young people, particularly on making them central to the adaptation agenda, but also within specific programs like the Adaptation Challenge, which is going to come up, and as well as the research and knowledge product that we'll be producing. So that is very, very great. I'm very happy to move on to introduce Hita Lakani, who is the Youngo focal point. And I mean, I've worked with Hita for many years now. She is a remarkable young leader. And today she'll be giving us perspective from the youth constituency of the UNFCCC, their role in the climate work, but also why adaptation is very important for young people. Ms. Hita Lakani, please, over to you. And thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you so much, Joshua. It's very weird to hear from you saying Miss Hita Lakani, but it's always a pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone. Like Josh already mentioned, I'm Hita, based in India, and the focal point for Youngo, along with Mary Claire, who's my co-focal point from Switzerland. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with all of you today, especially on the occasion of International Youth Day. And the theme for today's Youth Day is on food systems. And I think what Dr. Patrick just said, he basically stole my words out of my mouth when he spoke about the IPCC report and how adaptation is absolutely crucial in every single scenario that we're thinking of, that we're planning and we're working towards. But I think at the same time, we do have to realize that this is not possible just by itself. It's not going to happen if we just leave it for our leaders to, like we've seen for so many years to come, we're seeing a lot of talk, but we're not seeing it transform into action. While when you talk about young people, we're seeing youth taking these steps into action. We're seeing young people coming together, putting it, whether it's capacity building, whether it's education, whether it's just rallying and creating, lobbying for change, whether it's striking on the ground, whatever that might be. Youth have come together and are really driving the momentum to create change. And keeping in mind the theme of food systems this year, I think it is very, very important to realize that about 1/3 of global emissions comes from our food systems. And a lot of this is not being spoken about. We talk about the energy transformation, which is absolutely necessary, but we're not talking about a food systems transformation as much as we should be. And which is why it's absolutely great that this year we also have the UN Food Systems Summit next month coming up, putting all of this together in the light of connecting the dots between the different challenges that we have in our way when we want to transform and move towards a greener and a more sustainable climate. Even when we talk about food, I think this is something that doesn't really can be spoken about in silos, right? From how we grow it, what's growing, where we're growing, what is going into the soil to grow the food, until the entire process, until it reaches your table and the food that is wasted. I think the entire system, the cycle of the food system, is something that we need to be looking at. And I know of incredible young people who are looking precisely at this, trying to work with the youth or with communities on the ground, whether it's growing real food, sustainable food, or whether it's looking at the transportation system on how food is transported, or what happens to once food is wasted, ensuring that the waste is not creating even more emissions and adding to the climate problem. And I think this is where each of our role comes in. Every single one of us eats. And I think we need to start thinking about what we're eating, where is our food coming from, and what is happening once we've eaten the food. What is happening if there's any waste left? And I think it's quite simple. With all the change that we're seeing, with all the transformation that we're seeing, we definitely need to ramp up everything that we're doing a little bit more. Youth are definitely on the right path, we're all working together, especially in Yambo, the youth constituency. We're working on different aspects, focusing, of course, on COP26 in November, but working across on different aspects, whether it's agriculture, whether it's education, whether it's adaptation, mitigation, loss and damage, all of that put together. So continue doing what you're doing. We're here with you. And if you want to join Yambo, which is the official space for young people within the UN climate change process, please join us. We're open to anyone under the age of 35. We're an entirely volunteer-based network, and we'd love to have you there as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kita, for your leadership, for your commitment, and for all the actions that you are leading as part of the youth constituency. And also special thanks to our CEO, Patrick Verkoyen, for your support to the youth initiative. Today, we are celebrating the International Youth Day. My name is Adriana Valenzuela. I am the lead of the Youth Leadership and Education Program at GCA. And today is a day to recognize the commitment, the passion, the energy of young leaders from all over the world, and how important is your contribution to move forward the adaptation agenda. Also today, GCA is presenting a technical paper on young people and drivers and barriers to climate adaptation action, because producing knowledge, but also sharing is fundamental. And I would like to invite all of our speakers. We have an extraordinary panel with persons from India, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Somalia, Cote d'Ivoire, as well different experts from the Red Cross, the Center for Environment Education, the Foundation for Environmental Education, and the government of Canada. Then I would like to invite all of you, using also the opportunity that our CEO is with us, to turn on your cameras, and then we will take a family photo. Then I can see, we are connected from all over the world, from Rotterdam to India, to Asia, Latin America, all with the same objective, celebrating the International Youth Day, but also showcasing how youth are implementing adaptation solutions. Then Josh, please guide us with the photo, and we will continue with the agenda.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So please have your camera on, put up a good smile. And on the count of 3, I will take the photo. Awesome. So 1, 2, 3. So I have 1 frame done now. And then I go to the second screen. 1, 2, 3. Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Yeah, and please feel free to keep it on so we can see your faces. And back to you, Adriana.
Thank you. And thank you really, Patrick, our CEO. We are in a crucial time, and your leadership, also mobilizing global leaders and different stakeholders, is really inspiring, but also encouraging the young voices. And we will move forward now, presenting this technical paper. The technical paper has been an effort of the Global Center on Adaptation, working together with different partners. The Center for Environment Education in India, Kai Analytics, the Foundation for Environmental Education, as well young people from all over the world. More than 3,000 young leaders participate in the survey, and many others in the interview. And I am delighted to welcome my colleague, Dr. Sander Shah. He is a senior researcher on non-state actors and at the Global Center on Adaptation, and he has extensive experience working on research. I would like to invite you, Sander, to present the key findings of this technical paper, and also to give some ideas about how the process was. Please, Sander, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Adriana. And I will quickly share my screen. I hope you see my screen in 1 second. Do you see my screen?
Yes, excellent.
Perfect. So it's quite a challenge to present this report in 5 minutes, but let me concentrate on some key points here. I do encourage you to check out our report, which is now available online. I can share the link with you also after this presentation. We produced this report building on earlier studies that had already pointed out the importance of youth participation in adaptation governance. However, many of these studies were primarily focused on developed countries and climate mitigation action. Therefore, we structured this new report around these 4 questions. What do young people perceive as successful climate adaptation? What factors inhibit or enable their engagement? Are young people willing to change their lives, to make lifestyle changes, to enable successful adaptation? And how have extreme weather events incentivized youth adaptation action? To do this, we conducted a survey which was disseminated through youth networks. We also made efforts to encourage responses, especially from some countries in Africa and Asia. We did this through translating the survey in a couple of languages, but also by enlisting enumerators who would basically go door to door to collect data in areas with limited internet connectivity. We have received more than 3,000 responses, which makes it one of the larger surveys and the largest survey on this topic as far as we know. To gain a deeper understanding of the context of young people's climate adaptation efforts, we also conducted 20 interviews, particularly in Africa. On perceptions of what successful adaptation should look like, youth in our sample tend to refer to both adaptation and mitigation action. So this might reflect a thorough understanding of the linkages between reducing greenhouse gases and adapting to the impact of climate change action. It could also mean that adaptation as a distinct category of action is less well understood. But importantly, youth in our sample, they also associate adaptation with good governance and cooperation with civil society and governments. On inhibiting or enabling factors of youth adaptation action, we find that the major hurdle to youth participation, sorry, I'm on the wrong slide, to youth adaptation in planning and policy making remains the fact that they are often not invited. At the local and community level, we see that a lack of knowledge and experience may also inhibit youth climate adaptation action. I must say here, however, that youth don't necessarily need an invitation, of course, by governments to participate in climate adaptation. And in fact, they might be much more ambitious and usually are more ambitious than their own governments and their public authorities. And on willingness to change lifestyle, we see that almost half of our respondents are willing to pay more taxes if that helps successful adaptation. And almost a quarter is willing to accept a lower level of well-being compared to their parents' generation. We also find some regional differences here. For instance, respondents from Africa are more likely to indicate that they're willing to move to another country. Of course, we should ask the question whether it is fair to ask from young people to compromise on well-being, or whether leaving your country and your home and the environment you're used to can be a legitimate way of adapting to climate change. This is certainly very debatable. Now, finally, we interviewed young people in areas affected by Cyclone Idai and floods in the Horn of Africa to understand the extent to which these events have shaped youth climate adaptation action. Some of the people we have interviewed, I'm glad to see, are actually on this in this event to share their message to the world with us. Indeed, we find many examples of young people who are affected by these events, but also become champions of climate adaptation action. We find that they build on particular strengths. For instance, there's tech-savvy youth who use social media to build awareness, or you have the community leaders who take on new responsibilities when they are confronted with extreme weather events. And you have the bridge builders who build trust and connections between institutions, such as between NGOs, public agencies, and networks. Some of these examples, some of these quotes you find here and also in our report, of course. I'm very glad to hear some of our interviewees later on in this event. But let me conclude with just 3 observations or points of discussion. Now, it's clear that affected youth, they deal with a lot of stress and impacts also on mental health. That was something we came across a lot. Yet we see that many also step up despite being affected or because they are affected, to respond and to build resilience, not only for themselves, but also for their communities and for their country. There's also great potential in youth-led action, of course, but what I also see is that governments and grown-ups, quote unquote, often talk about youth as a resource, but youth and young people are not just a resource to exploit. Their actions can never substitute for the responsibility of the grown-ups and governments who hold political and economic power. So that is very important. Therefore, youth action should not depend on the invitation of governments to participate. Finally, young people are too little involved in decision-making, and engaging them is consistent, and this is especially a message for governments, it is consistent with adaptation on the longer term, because adaptation is most definitely a question of intergenerational justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sander, and also for your commitment and leadership. You have been leading the preparation of this technical report. And one of the key messages, it is crucial to engage young people in the decision-making processes, but as well in adaptation action. And another co-leader of this technical report is Siri. Siri Singh, she works at the Center for Environment Education in India, and she is the program coordinator on climate change. Siri, you have been working on climate change education and education for sustainable development for several years. What do you think is the role of education as a driver of the adaptation action among young people? Over to you, Siri.
Thank you so much, Adriana. And thank you, Sander, for sharing the overall findings and the key outcomes. Today, I'm here to share some of the key findings when it comes to role of education and networks. So like picking up from one of the major findings, which said that youth with exposure to extreme weather events were found highly engaged in adaptation. So that came as a major finding, and it really got me thinking, because what we actually expected was the other way around. I'm sure everyone here will agree that young people, we want young people to get so actively engaged and empowered that they should be able to tackle the climate risks. And not only tackle the risks, they also help build resilience of the communities towards these climate impacts. And as Sander very rightly mentioned, should be able to participate in policy making as well. So now education definitely has the power to do that. And when I say education, it means any of the modes, be it formal, informal, through participatory dialogues, social media, and any other platforms. Our study also reinforced the fact that education is an important driver of youth engagement at local, regional, and as well as national level. For instance, when it comes to national level decision making, the study showed that youth with higher level of education were 1.2 more times more likely to participate. So that came as a really good finding of the report. And in fact, the study also made some observations on how education not only plays an important role in providing the youth with the requisite knowledge, but it also helped them develop certain life skills. For instance, communication, being a good facilitator, team building skills, and of course, I mean, not to forget the leadership development. So when it came to our study, we also saw that higher the youth were educated, more leadership roles they were taking in climate adaptation. Even as simple as interacting with the policymakers, education played a very important role when it came to youth being, interacting with policymakers and trying to make some statements on behalf of their community. Now coming to the youth networks, and there are some interesting findings to highlight there also. So when we surveyed these youth, we saw that young people from the networks were twice more engaged with policymakers and were leading adaptation action already. And when we compared them with the youth who were not such part of the when we were not part of such collaborations, we didn't find. I mean, we found a significant difference between the two. And when we saw precisely the African youth, we saw that they were contributing twice more at the community level, even if they were part of very small networks. So that kind of important findings we received as part of the survey. And lastly, I mean, even if we see the whole point how we did the study, most of the youth who participated in our surveys belong to networks, and this was because of the simple idea that the youth from the networks are more engaged, they are more approachable, and they have willingness to participate in such studies and have interesting insights to share in the form of stories from their knowledge and from their experiences. I would like to conclude by saying that the study did recognize the fact again that education is an important driver of youth engagement, but it also identified that when education is combined with active networking opportunities and platforms, it helped youth to disseminate the knowledge they had gained and how they could lead collective actions and resilience measures. They were able to share their concerns being part of the network. And most importantly, as Sander also mentioned, will make them participate in the decision-making processes as well. So this was all from my side. I thank GCA for having me today, and I'm giving it back to Adriana and Josh. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Siri, and a special thanks to the Center of Environmental Education in India for being a partner and also contribute to move this agenda forward. As you said, one of the key elements is building how young people can help to build resilience. And it is also why this Global Center on Adaptation, and especially the Youth Leadership Program, is investing in education, networking opportunities, and platforms to bring decision makers, young people, and organizations together. And now we will move forward listening young leaders, because this report was prepared with the participation of more than 3,000 youth that contributed in the survey, but also many others were interviewed. Then I would like to invite three of these key actors. We will have Elizabeth Kulungu. She is from Zimbabwe, and she is the project manager at the African Youth Initiative on Climate Change. Also, we have Hassan Yassin. He is working with the Somali Greenpeace Association, and also Sidia Chisungo. She is founder of the Central Apio in Mozambique. You have been part of this technical paper, and now we would like to hear from you about your perspective, how youth action in extreme weather events, how have been this experience, and also what are you doing to move adaptation action. Then let's start with Elizabeth. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us. You are in Zimbabwe. Please share your thoughts with us. Over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for the platform and the invitation. It's good to be speaking amongst a number of champions in the climate change space who are working on adaptation. So yes, as rightfully indicated, I'm Elizabeth Gulugulu from Zimbabwe, the southern part of Africa, which has been constantly been affected by floods. And also, according to the IPCC 6th report, it indicates that this part of the region will be affected by a lot of droughts and floods, which means that a lot of investment in terms of adaptation is really needed. I represent a youth organization called the African Youth Initiative on Climate Change. And 2 years back, Zimbabwe was affected by floods, unexpected floods, because Zimbabwe is a landlocked country. And this is something that there was poor planning from the national level, and people were not prepared. As a youth organization, it was very difficult to offer our assistance because we didn't have resources at that particular moment. But then we later on realized that if we partner with other organizations, we can mobilize resources that can actually assist us in building up capacities of other young people and communities that are in those vulnerable communities, that are in those vulnerable areas. So last year, which is in 2020, we managed to visit the affected areas. We managed to mobilize resources from the government of Zimbabwe and also from other UN agencies. The main reason why we wanted to visit those areas is because of building capacity, like I said, because we wanted to make sure that we reduce the vulnerabilities, because these people are now much exposed to these kind of risk, and wanted to mitigate risk and try as much as possible to build resilience. Because at the end of the day, we know that young people are energetic, they are capacitated. If they are capacitated, then it will be possible for them to take action. So we offered them capacity, we identified some gaps, and we also identified some opportunities. Because some of the reasons why most of the people went missing and why most people died is because there is massive land degradation and massive deforestation happening in those areas. So most people, they were affected due to mudslides. So we managed to identify those gaps, and it was quite an opportunity for young people to start reforestation projects, which they can partner with the government of Zimbabwe and the Forest Commission, and also getting some sort of allowance. Then the other thing was to make sure that young people in the communities there, they value biodiversity conservation, because at the end of it all, you find out that communities, especially rural communities, they rely mostly on natural resources as a source of livelihoods for food. And I'm glad that this year's theme is on sustainable foods. So they rely for food, for livelihoods, etc. So we had to make sure that they value and they understand the importance of biodiversity conservation. As they protect and conserve the biodiversity, they're also protecting and conserving their livelihoods. Just to add on, as you know, that countries are also in the process of renewing their nationally determined contributions. It was also our role and responsibilities as young people to make sure that the adaptation component is also part and parcel of our nationally determined contributions. Most NDCs will focus on mitigation, but we realized that Zimbabwe being a vulnerable country, it was very important to make sure that adaptation is part of its NDCs, so as to improve resilience, so as to improve our adaptive capacity. Without saying much, thank you so much for the platform.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And this call that you have made, inviting governments and countries to integrate adaptation as a key part of the national determined contribution, is fundamental. Now we are going to move forward. From Zimbabwe, now we are going to listen about the experience in Somalia. Then Hassan Hassim, please, it's over to you. Hassan, can you hear us? I think we have a problem with Hassan. We will come back with him, and then now we are going to move forward with Syria. She is based in Mozambique. Mozambique also have been suffering different weather events. Then Celia, please share with us your experience. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone that is watching us today. Yes, as you were mentioning, Mozambique is also one of the most vulnerable countries in the continent to suffer from natural disasters, specifically floods. And a few years ago, 2019, we were affected by the cyclone Idai. Only in a few weeks, more than 1,000 people lost their lives. So it's not an easy thing. And before I born, which was in the year 2000, we heard when we started to grow up about floods that affected one of our provinces here and was bad, but we never had any idea of how it looks like. And in 2019, we literally experienced one of the most terrible moments in our country, not in the province that I am, I'm in Maputo, but the cyclone Idai happened in the center of the country, which was Sofala. And without even understanding exactly what was happening, from receiving information from our friends who were in Sofala telling us that the situation is bad, from one night to morning, we started to mobilize resources to make sure that we would send enough aid and support to people. And what we did with the experience that we had from other campaigns, not related to climate change or things like that, we decided to collect donations, all the type of donations, but also teaching people how they could collect donations in wherever they would be, specifically in their provinces, and then we would coordinate transportation to send. And one of the biggest things that made us feel so proud was the number of people who were showing their solidarity by going to the port of Maputo, not only delivering what they had to support, but also giving their force and their support to organize things, to pack and then to send. And what did we learn with what happened on that time? I've never been an advocate or an activist for climate change or things like that. I've always been about human rights, etc. But at that time, we saw that everyone, regardless of the area of work, everyone was concentrated and paying attention that we all need to pay attention about the changes that are happening in other countries. Because if we are all focused in doing other things and we don't think about the future, by the end, any other thing that we do will be reduced to zero. So what we learned, the first thing, it's important as country that we know that we are vulnerable to start planning and thinking ahead, thinking about the future, making sure, for example, that people don't build in the areas that are more likely to be affected when the disaster as Cyclone Idai happens. We also need to pay attention of the type of constructions that happens, because most of the time we think that we go for the cheap materials, we go for what's easy. But honestly, the adaptation, the process of trying to build after a disaster is more expensive than building something good itself. So this is one of the things that we also found that we need to pay attention. The other thing that it's important is that we need to massively start talking about prevention, but also how we can give a response in the best way possible. Because most of the times when things happen, people really want to support, but they don't know how. And it's where young people get, because we have the ability with all our innovative way of thinking, we can build a system that allow those who need and those who can support to literally get together, and we get the results that we want very, very easily. So one of the biggest things that happened a few weeks before the cyclone Idai that allowed us to be more successful was because we have been campaigning for other causes, and all that experience we used for cyclone Idai. And it's important in other countries, young people, to start preparing these systems and understanding how they could respond in a very short time. Because I've been saying this all the time, there are things that we cannot totally avoid. Disasters, they will always happen. What we can do is to prevent, but also prepare a response that will allow people not to feel in 100% the impact. If we can do something that will allow people just to feel a little bit, but also have the possibility to, within their resilience, still be alive and still have possibilities to eat and get back to their life easily, that can really help us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silvia. And as you said, it's fundamental to prepare young people about how they can mobilize their communities and also prepare others for the weather events. It's about also preparing and getting ready. Now we are going to move forward with our last young speaker, and we move from Zimbabwe to Somalia. Then Hassan, please share with us your experience. Over to you, Hassan. I think we have Hassan. Hassan is just having some technical issues. In the meantime, Josh, please, if you can follow up with him. And we are also to listen from experts and organizations that are working on adaptation and climate resilience. One of these organizations is the Red Cross, with offices in all over the world. And I would like to invite Rup Singh to share what the Red Cross is doing in supporting youth in climate action. Over to you, Rup.
Thank you, Adriana. And thank you everyone for being here. And it's a pleasure to join you in this meeting. So my name is Rup. I work with the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center, and the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement around the world is the first to respond when disasters happen. We're a volunteer-driven movement, and many of our volunteers are young people. And they see firsthand the extreme weather events that result in disasters and that impact their local communities. So this is definitely something that hits home. I really appreciate what some of the previous speakers have said about, especially Sita, about the message about preparing for before a disaster, because this very much resonates with the work of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. So we as a movement wanted to find a way to engage this group of young people in climate action. And so we developed a youth climate strategy that was designed with and for youth. And one thing that we realized is sometimes there's lots of strategies out there and they're very high level, and it's not clear what action can youth really take based on this strategy. So what we wanted to do was make a strategy that was very practical and almost like a work plan. So it makes it easier for youth to take action compared to other strategies that are out there that are kind of like sitting up here and you don't really know what you can do. So this strategy was endorsed by the movement. It gave youth a practical tool to speak to their leaders about how they could be taking climate action. And it has 3 pillars. So the pillars are awareness. So being aware of climate change impacts the science and also how it affects the youth in their own places where they live. Action, so how do you take action on climate adaptation, for example, and advocacy. How do you advocate for more climate action, both on mitigation and adaptation within the places where you live? And so we made it kind of like a toolkit. So the strategy contains a series of tools that we've developed, that other organizations have developed to engage youth. And so I wanted to focus on a couple of those. One is something called Why Adapt. It's a youth curriculum that we've developed that guides young people to understand adaptation and encourage them to take local action and take on local adaptation projects in their own communities. So this is a youth curriculum that we've developed and sort of rolled out in countries around the world. So I wanted to share a couple of examples of places where this has been used and where young people have started to develop their own adaptation projects. So for example, in Kenya, youth participants realized that in the community where they were living, some people and students in particular would go hungry at times. And so they undertook their own urban gardening project near the school where they lived, and they encouraged their local community to grow fruits and vegetables like spinach, cabbage, etc., to help supplement the food that students had. In Haiti, there was youth who got together based on this curriculum, and they said, look, there's a public market near where we live, and every couple of weeks during the rainy season, it floods. So how can we get together and talk with the people who go to the market and develop a way so that this doesn't affect their livelihoods? In Trinidad and Tobago, they started a garden to kitchen project where they worked with a nursery to start preparing garden beds that would eventually bring sort of green and nutritious foods to other young people. In the Philippines, they worked on construction of a flood control project where they did tree planting to prevent flooding and soil erosion. So there's lots of examples, and I think one of the things that's been most effective is having clear, short activities that young people can really quickly engage in, so they don't have to spend a lot of time reading or trying to educate themselves over like years. They don't really need to do that to take an action, right? They can really take action easily over the course of a couple of days, and then have that be a part of their ongoing education on climate. And then lastly, I think the other thing that I would add is we've also developed a platform for youth to engage together on this topic. We've created a Facebook group within the Red Cross Red Crescent movement, which has been really nice because then you have people in the Philippines talking to people based in Kenya and sort of sharing ideas. And then one last thing that's been really important is that a lot of times we develop materials and amazing tools, but they're never translated. And one thing we've heard over and over from the people within our network is we wish that we had access to these materials in our own language. So that's one thing we've really prioritized. And we've tried our best. So right now, some of our tools are in 12 different languages. So that's really helped to make them more accessible to people around the world. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And also thank you for the excellent work that the Red Cross is leading in all over the world. And we look forward to continue working with you, especially to implement this toolkit and to engage young people in concrete projects at local level. Now we are going to continue with our next speaker. He is Adama Bamba. He is also member of the Youth Advisory Board of the African Union, and he is joining us today from Côte d'Ivoire. Adama, please share with us your perspective. Over to you, Adama.
Thank you, Adriana. So hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm Adama Bamba. I'm the Vice Chairperson of Africa Youth Advisory Board on Disaster Risk Reduction. So I will definitely give some perspective. So yeah, we noticed during our efforts within the 2 years we have been established that young people are really proactive to make action, but they just want to support their community. They just want to do something. They just want to make to feel themselves important. Therefore, building the capacity of those youth will better help the efficiency, the effectiveness of youth across Africa. And we also know that in Africa generally, youth, they do action. We are really involved, but in terms of action, but in terms of policy, when it comes to formulation, review of policy, when it comes to evaluation of policy, youth are really not present. We are not on the table. So including youth, since the formulation of policy will increase definitely action of youth and will help also to coordinate youth action with the policy established at national level. Like those recommendations I'm giving is just focused on at national level. And like I say also, like we have quite a lot of policy, but in terms of action that engage youth, it's really difficult to find it. You can like I take just a quick example. Like we have like, let's say the program of action for like disaster risk reduction in Africa. And we have also like at all rates, you can find a program of action for gender inclusion. Like, but when we come to youth, there is no framework for youth, no program of action for youth. That is like, that means that like when we come to youth, generally is not really well considered, yeah, in terms of like in Africa. Also, like I think it will be really important, like to build a strong collaboration between youth and policymakers, because when there is a collaboration, we can coordinate together, we can work together to like let's achieve resilience in Africa, in all like in all the countries within Africa. And like just this is limited by bureaucracy. Let's say in Africa, even us, we have like we are supposed to work closely with the national focal point of the like disaster risk reduction, but it's almost 2 years. Myself, I'm trying to meet the focal point in Africa. I'm not like here in my country. I'm not being able to do that. But when it comes to like like international organization, when it comes to like youth network, it's easy to like to meet, to collaborate, to make action. But like for national authorities, who are the like the lead in terms of implementation, in terms of the policy, there is no collaboration. This is very very difficult for youth in Africa. And also, I think one thing also is youth are not really supported in terms of financial, like finance support, because in Africa, we know we are always trying to make action, but when you want to make action, it's like with in terms with finance. But when you come to finance, it's difficult to have access to finance, and there is always some bureaucracy that limits your coordination with the national platform, which are supposed to lead the the action, like the resilience strategy in our different communities, in our different countries. And last one thing is like we don't have really the information. Yeah, the last thing, when you have information, it's easier for you to like make action. But when you are not updated about the information, this is very difficult for you to adjust or let's say to align your action with the policy. What we really need is like we really need a good collaboration between us and policymakers, and we need support from like policymakers, and also we need really collaboration between networks, like between like different youth leaders. That's why it's really important to establish a national youth platform to coordinate all action at local level. So I think this is my perspective, and yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adama. And one of the challenges that you have highlighted is how young people can access to finance and how they can partner with decision makers, with governments, and with other stakeholders. And also the Global Center on Adaptation is working on that, how we can build bridges, how we can build platforms to engage everyone as part of the solution. Now let's listen also from two key partners of the Global Center on Adaptation. I would like to invite our next speaker. We have with us Kimberly Olson. She works with the government of Canada. And Kimberly, Canada has been one of the governments who has put young people as priority. You have developed a youth national strategy. Also, the Prime Minister of Canada participated at the Adaptation Summit in January, highlighting the key role of young people in climate adaptation action. From your perspective, what message would you give to young people from the planning angle? Over to you, Kimberly.
Thank you very much, Adriana. I have the pleasure to kick off closing remarks from what was a very exciting and inspiring dialogue today. And to kick off my remarks, I'd really like to go back to one of the key takeaways from the technical report. And that is, when given the opportunity to understand adaptation, youth get it. You grasp the cost of inaction, you see the positive payoffs from taking action, you engage, and you act. Across the globe, youth have shown an inspiring level of commitment in taking action to climate change, and your voices are essential as we move forward. Governments, as you had mentioned, are increasingly acknowledging the important role of youth. And reflecting this, Adriana, as you had highlighted, the Government of Canada has a number of processes in place to engage with youth, and these mechanisms continue to grow. Environment and Climate Change Canada, the department that I represent here today, is in the process of launching a new youth council. And the aim is to seek input on the defining environmental issues of our time. This includes nature-based solutions to fight both climate change and biodiversity loss, as well as achieving net zero emissions by 2050. I'm really heartened to see that the voice of youth in the fight against climate change is increasing, and that this is reflecting your knowledge, your skills, your values, as well as your priorities. The Fridays for Future movement brought a lot of attention to the role and power of youth, but I think we all know that there was important action taking place before this movement started, likely including many of you on the call here today, and that this momentum is only going to continue. So in closing, I would simply like to reiterate the importance of your voice and your support for raising climate ambition, and to thank you for your contributions. And lastly, to encourage you to continue this important work. So thank you, and happy International Youth Day.
Thanks a lot, Kimberly. And we look forward to continue working with Canada in this process to empower youth as an agent of change, and especially to mobilize adaptation solutions. And now also, I am very glad to invite our next speaker. He is Daniel Chafter. He is the CEO of the Foundation for Environmental Education, who has members in over 77 countries. And the Foundation for Environmental Education is leading concrete projects and solutions, engaging schools, but also local authorities and other actions. And the foundation also participates in the preparation of this technical paper. Daniel, from your perspective, how do you think the education and also engaging young people can play a role in mobilizing adaptation solutions? Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Adriana, and thank you for all the speakers before me. This has been very interesting and exciting, and I've been absolutely thrilled to see so many of you here participating and contributing to this discussion. I think from what I've been hearing and what I've been reading in the report, there's a few things that kind of came to mind that I would like to maybe raise, and they're not in any priority of importance, but it's just a few things. The one is that when you look at part of the report, we see that awareness and knowledge are extremely important, but then the personal experience is really a huge driver to take action, to participate and to change. And I think that educational processes need to embed that action and that personal that personal experience in the educational process in order to create that impact. So I think that's a very important point. Another point that kind of came out, and looking at the people that are talking here and the report, etc., I think it's really important that we don't present climate change as a crisis for the developing countries only. This is a crisis that we're all part of. We all need to be invested in this, regardless of our GDP or our ethnic background or our location. And the fact that certain countries are being affected by this sooner, or that they have less means to deal with certain crises, doesn't change the fact that this crisis is going to affect, in the end, everybody. And I think it's, and in order to have buy-in from everybody, we need to be careful that we don't divide this as to a problem of one side of the world. It's not. It's a problem that we're all invested in, and we all have to take action in order to solve. Another thing that came out that I thought was very interesting was that if you look at the report and you look at figure 3, then there was a point that said I was not invited or asked was the highest impacting element for non-participation, at least in 3 of the question areas out of the 4. And I think that, you know, one can look at this from 2 angles. The one is that youth are not invited enough into the discussion. The other is, should we be waiting to be invited into the discussion? And I think this is something we need to think about. We need to be proactive about this and demand our position as youth to be part of the discussion. If we expect our older generation to invite us, we might be very disappointed. So I think this is something we need to think about. Another thing that I think a lot about when I'm looking at the challenges that we're facing through education, dealing with climate change education, is that we're such a diverse world. We have so many quarrels and so many problems at so many levels. We have to look within the educational processes also, and now I'm looking at maybe at the younger generation of this youth group that we're looking at. We have to look at some of the soft skills as well. We have to embed empathy as a huge part of what we're doing in educational processes. I always give an example that if you expect a child or a young person in Copenhagen, where I come from, to decide that they're not going to buy a gadget that they really, really want because it affects somebody else that they don't know and will never meet in their lives. You know, that understanding and that emotional commitment has to be part of what we drive in our educational processes. And another thing that I think is important, and I want to bring up with you, is that many times we forget that there's in fact a lot of behaviors that our older generation are doing that we can connect to, and we can connect them to the message that we want to drive. If anybody who went into a mechanic's shop in India understands that at least some components of circular economy are happening there. Now, it's a sustainability process that nobody calls sustainability, and they don't appreciate that what they're doing is a sustainable process, but they are doing it. And I think that we can connect to that in the dialogue that we have with our older generations, for them to understand better what are some of the messages that we're trying to drive. And then I think these are just a few of the messages that I would bring to the discussion today, and I thank you all for the time that you gave me.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and looking forward to continue with FEE in implementing different adaptation solutions and actions. And now, a special thanks to all our speakers and also to the colleagues of this technical paper. Now we will open the floor for some questions. Then we will have time for 3. If you have any question or comment, please raise your hand and share with us. Then I am checking, you can also write in the chat. In the chat, we have a very active conversation with people from all over the world, sharing links, sharing materials, and it is the idea. The Youth Adaptation Dialogues aims to provide a platform to sharing good practices and experiences, but as well connecting. Then, do we have any question, comment? We have some minutes here. So please raise your hand and we will be glad to hear from you. I think that I have not seen any request. Just to mention that in the website of the Global Center on Adaptation, you can access the report. The report, the technical paper is available on, as well on the website. There is a video summarizing the key messages as well in social media. If you would like to be part of the Youth Adaptation Network, there is also a link in our chat to sign up and to be part of the different initiatives that we are leading. Then without any other words, I would like to say thank you to everyone who have joined the 3rd Youth Adaptation Dialogue. Also, thank you for your leadership, for your commitment, for the actions that you are implementing, and happy International Youth Day. Looking forward to continue working with all of you. And then now, please feel free also to turn on the camera before we have only the speakers, but now everyone, we have people from all over the world, and we will also finalize taking another family photo. Then Josh will help us with this.
Okay, thanks everyone. Yes, on the count of 3, I'll get a shot from the screen. Please turn your video on. I think I don't have full screen yet, so please turn it on. Let's get a full screen with your beautiful faces, and in celebration of the Youth Day, put some smile on. Okay, I think now we are good to go. So 1, 2, 3. Perfect. All right, thanks a lot. And looking forward that you'll be able to join us for the next dialogue next month. And do keep in touch, join the Youth Adaptation Network, and please share the report and share it widely. And do send us feedback as well through our email address, youth@gca.org. Thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, George. Have an excellent day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.